The Verkhovna Rada has ratified the agreement on a centennial partnership with the United Kingdom. The agreement is aimed at deepening ties in the fields of security and defense and strengthening the partnership for future generations.
I am proud to say on behalf of the United Kingdom that we stand with you not only today or tomorrow, this year or next, but for the next 100 years.
This is an important element for us, of course, because they believe that Ukraine is a vital part of European security. And traditionally, the good relations between our president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, Starmer, and the British political establishment as a whole are, let's say, an important element of such cooperation.
In addition, the United Kingdom plans to open its largest drone manufacturing plant in 2026. They will produce Storm Shadow drones there, which are already in service with Britain to be sent, among other places, to Ukraine.
This year, the United Kingdom will increase its drone deliveries to Ukraine tenfold, from 10,000 last year to 100,000 this year.
The idea of such large-scale drone production is absolutely justified on the one hand, because everyone understands that a lot of drones will be needed now. We are living in an era of drone warfare, not a war of airplanes, not a war of tanks, or a war of artillery. And such production will be guaranteed orders, at least from Europe, for many, many years, which gives it very bright prospects.
But still, the value of the United Kingdom for Ukraine lies not so much in military support, but rather in political support. The British are doing everything possible to keep US President Trump on their side. They even involved the King of England for this purpose. For the first time in history, Trump and First Lady Melania will be officially received at Windsor Castle.
Britain's value, let's put it this way, is not in the mass supply of weapons, but very often in its political stance. Because many people look to Britain as an example, and right now, Britain is becoming a very important element in the interactions between the United States and Europe. Because for some reason, this is exactly how Trump is building this communication. For example, not wanting to have direct contact with Ursula von der Leyen of the European Union. When we talk about security guarantees for Ukraine, we immediately recall the rule of the coalition of willing countries. And who was the initiator of this? Britain, and France.
The company Rheinmetall has also hinted that they are supplying Ukraine with a new secret drone, the FV-014. It is known that the drone has a strike range of up to 100 kilometers. It can fly in a swarm, and it has somehow already been tested in combat.
Are these loitering munitions, or is the company only planning to scale up their production? And indeed, just how effective they are, all these questions remain unanswered for now.
In addition to the presumed drone deliveries, the company is also actively assisting Ukraine with countermeasure systems.
The new Sky Ranger drone interception systems will be in Ukraine as early as this year. Right now, we can produce up to 100 of them per year, but we plan to increase that number to 200. Each system can cover an area of up to 4 square kilometers and shoot down all drones within that radius.
The line between opposing sides stretches for a great distance, tens of kilometers. And there is no equipment there, no tanks, because building a tank costs millions, tens of millions of dollars, which can be destroyed by a drone costing just $20,000. These things are simply incomparable.
The current military situation shows that the future belongs to drones. And it is very important that Ukraine's key partners understand this and are constantly ramping up production.
If Russia's military production is insufficient, Putin will help with his pistol and the military reform he recently showcased during the Zapad 2025 exercises. Who was this signal intended for, and did anyone actually get scared of Putin? It's time to find out. And not only on these issues, of course. My name is Alexander Prepodobny, and I'm bringing Rostislav Murzogulov, a political technologist, into our discussion. Rostislav, hello, glad to see you.
Hello, Sasha. Hi there.
So, the Zapad 2025 exercises, a rather comical video where a gloomy Putin in military uniform tries to reload a pistol. Tell me, who was he trying to scare with that?
Well, this is the second time in the past 6 months that I've seen him in military uniform. And for some reason, in that uniform, he looks much more like a security guard from Pyaterochka than a soldier. Because, of course, Putin has never been a soldier. He earned all his stripes by informing on St. Petersburg students and earlier, apparently, on his colleagues in the Stasi and the Russian KGB residency where he worked in East Germany. That's precisely why these particular exercises are, without a doubt, absolute idiocy. Essentially, it is a very foolish and almost laughable admission of their own complete powerlessness, because the drills are held merely to rattle their weapons, make a show of force, and attempt to scare or intimidate the neighbors. Tell me, what exactly is Putin planning to scare the neighbors with when he actually attacked one of the neighboring countries with all his ridiculous might? Yet, even with all that aforementioned ridiculous might, he couldn't capture this country, a country that is much smaller, with a weaker economy, no gas pipelines, no Soviet nuclear missiles, and he still failed to take it over. That's the first point. Second, after he dug in his heels and pushed further, in 2 years he managed to capture just 1% of that country's territory. Of course, I'm not hinting at anything, although it's clear that we're talking about Ukraine. So these exercises are supposed to show that, sure, I couldn't capture Ukraine and couldn't accomplish a single one of the loudly proclaimed goals there, but I've supposedly kept some trump cards in reserve for whom? For Poland. Well, okay, as far as Poland is concerned, the whole story with those drones was really something. I mean, it's obvious why they launched them as part of these exercises. Clearly, these gerunds weren't loaded from the start. They're basically just cardboard mock-ups, fake gerunds, not the deadly ones that actually fly over here to Lubyanivka, and I'm sure they also reach the area where you live, Sasha. But fine, he launched them, and we all saw that Europe is completely exposed, that it is absolutely unprepared for war and not ready for it at all. So now, does this turn out to be an advantage for Putin or for Ukraine? Naturally, this is not an advantage for Putin, because after that, the European generals most likely got together, had a lot of meetings under the aegis of NATO and so on. They all discussed it, talked it over, and realized that, yes, we Europeans are not ready for war. We are very afraid of Putin, and what conclusion suggests itself? Of course, there's only one conclusion. It's better to support Ukraine, because Ukraine is the only country in all of Europe that is ready for war, and it has proven this not with empty talk, but with real action. And in the end, who actually benefited from what Putin did with these cardboard maneuvers? Once again, it turned out to be against him. He's such a remarkable person. Everything he tries to do ultimately backfires on him. It's a pity, of course, that along the way there have been so many negative consequences from all his actions.
Absolutely, Rostislav, but I also want to ask you more generally about the results of the Zapad 2025 exercises. Tell us, from a political technology perspective, who were they meant to impress? It's also interesting that Lavrov stated that Russians will kill all foreign military personnel who are on the territory of Ukraine, considering them legitimate targets. So it turns out they are actually afraid that foreign legions might enter. So tell me, what effect did these exercises have on Ukraine's allies, and not just them?
No, they didn't have any effect, because in reality, this is a very old story. I've been to the front line and to the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces many times, including places where there are foreign fighters as well. For the Russian army, there are two kinds of sweet pies. Those are journalists, or accordingly, foreign military personnel. That's why, as soon as they find out about the presence of foreigners or journalists somewhere, their whole plan just collapses. And for example, regarding journalists, I was in Kherson. I can't mention the exact dates of my trips because the intelligence on the other side works well, and I've been asked not to do so. But I won't say when I was there, but I saw an entire section of a multi-story building completely destroyed just because 2 American journalists were living there. Accordingly, as soon as they find out that, for example, 2 foreign fighters are staying somewhere, they do the same thing, meaning they bury everyone there along with all the residents, if of course they hit the target. But usually they end up hitting neighboring houses and apartments because their weapons are highly inaccurate. So here as well, in general, there hasn't been any paradigm shift, nothing new has happened, and they haven't scared the Europeans with anything new. Well, except for the fact that now all of us, meaning all the residents of Ukraine and those who are closely following all of this, of course, we understand that Europe is truly absolutely unprepared for war. But probably all these European generals already knew this before. Now we, the audience, have learned it too.
Interestingly, by the way, Poland explained to China the reasons for closing the borders with Belarus. On September 15th, there was a meeting between the Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs and his Chinese counterpart, who arrived in Warsaw on an official visit. Sikorski emphasized that the decision in Warsaw is related not to trade, but to security. Poland pointed to provocations from Minsk and the destructive actions of Moscow. Closing the borders is costly for Poland, but security is more important. Tell me, please, am I right in understanding that China is concerned that Chinese goods are not passing through the Belarusian border into Europe? This is also kind of a tool of influence, bypassing Russia between Europe and China. And how significant is this mechanism right now?
Very well, let China be concerned. Specifically, this little route that Chinese trucks were using probably won't have much impact on China's economy with its budget of, trillions of dollars. Obviously, this is just a kind of warning sign. No, of course, China here is just, since China declared itself at that dictator summit as the main dictator and the director of the dictators club, accordingly within its director's authority, China, roughly speaking, is clarifying things. You put pressure on one of our dictators there. Please explain why. We have just now been elected as the leadership of this club, so please tell us what happened. So now Poland will have to explain to them. But the most interesting thing is that in reality, this so-called dictators club is just a rattle for China, right? It's like a pacifier for Putin, right? It's just to scare, to test the waters, because China has absolutely no intention of ever going to war with either Europe or America. It would be like hysterically and hatefully shooting one of your own body parts because China is deeply intertwined with the economies of Europe and America. And this is, in fact, a mutual, very tight interconnection. If China ever decides to turn against the West, then China would be shooting itself in the foot first and foremost, if it's lucky, just the foot. So basically, China, with the help of its various bulldogs on leashes, like Putin, Lukashenko, and other scoundrels, tries to scare Europe and America. But at the same time, it will still continue trading with these countries, primarily with Europe and America. And all these bulldogs, at best, are only useful for Wang Yi to call Warsaw and ask, so why did you close the border with Belarus? Oh, because they let the Gerbers in? Well, fine, they closed it, that's all there is to it.
I also want to talk to you about Trump's visit to the Foggy Albion. The American president was really received there in royal fashion. Carriage, parade, salute. Well, in short, the pictures here are just... Are these the photos with Epstein? Yes. Yeah, it kind of makes you think and you... Right? Of course, yes. And Putin could only dream of something like that in Alaska, though he would probably want it for sure. But nevertheless, here are Britain and the USA. How important is this alliance right now? And could you please share your opinion? Also, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine has just ratified an agreement on a century-long partnership with the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, with almost all deputies voting in favor. We are, of course, always grateful for British support here, and we truly appreciate the role of every Prime Minister who, regardless of their political affiliation, has always spoken out in support of Ukraine. But overall, right now, there is this close partnership between the United States and the United Kingdom. What's your assessment? Can they do something significant for the world together?
Once, in the turbulent times of my foggy youth, there was a performer named Vargas Kyriakos Panetou, better known to the world as George Michael. At some point, he released a music video called Good Papi, and in it, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom was depicted as the pet dog of the American president. Well, to be honest, that's the balance of power in the world economy. You haven't seen that video? Watch it, you'll definitely like it. So basically the setting changes, the names of presidents and prime ministers change, but the balance of power, I emphasize, of course, does not change because the UK, or more precisely the subordinate role, is roughly speaking just an office for Americans to do business in Europe and around the world. And of course, the UK has no intention of giving up its role as this very important back office. And that's why this royal meeting is happening. That's why Prince Charles naturally is playing the role of the English Queen here, although in fact he is the English King. But in general, he is fulfilling this role and doing it brilliantly because everyone understands that you have to do everything possible, dance around Trump or any other American president with a tambourine so that, God forbid, they don't choose some other place as their office. After all, you never know. There's another island on the way from America to Europe, Greenland, and it seems to spark some peculiar interest among the Americans. Who knows? Maybe they'll shift their interests there, or maybe in some place like Iceland, Trump might suddenly get some new feverish ideas in his head. That's why they go out of their way to show that they remain your back office, that they're with you, and they're not planning to quarrel with you, even if there might be some disagreements regarding foreign policy. At the same time, of course, they made a point of emphasizing everywhere, and all the leaks made it clear that King Charles himself would personally put pressure, well, actually, it's more correct to call him king now, would personally put pressure on Trump that it would be better if he put pressure on Putin. But frankly, such pressure is unlikely to yield any results. What could actually make a difference is if Europe really does fulfill Trump's requests, not because it's a good request, but regarding not cooperating with Putin in the area of purchasing oil products, which are essentially Putin's, because, well, it really isn't a good thing. And then maybe Trump will eventually start fulfilling his own promises as well. That's basically how things stand.
So Zelensky will be in the US next week. Let me remind you that at the UN General Assembly, it is quite likely that a meeting between Trump and the president of Ukraine will take place. This has already been reported by the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Let me remind you, these news reports started and led to discussion after a quote from Mark Rubio, the US Secretary of State, about a possible meeting. Now, it really does seem like this is a very likely event. What should they talk about? Tell me, please, will Trump try to persuade the Ukrainian president to do something since this meeting is now inevitable? Or will there be some kind of conversation with Putin beforehand about some new developments? Or will nothing change? Give your assessment.
The good thing about the current policy is that it's absolutely transparent. There really aren't any secrets from anyone. Nobody is hiding anything. Zelensky even gave a big interview to an American channel on Skype, where he explained in great detail everything he plans to say to Trump and nothing else. I think in principle that's exactly what he'll say to Trump, nothing more. In this interview, Trump heard clear signals from Zelensky that Zelensky is tired of waiting, Ukraine is tired of waiting, that there have been promises, and Trump has made many. The American electorate was reassured by these promises, but at the same time, they have not stopped supporting Ukraine. 60%, 67% of Americans believe that Ukraine not only needs to be supported, but also supported in their decision not to give any territory to Putin. And that's why, for Trump, this is, of course, very serious. And accordingly, roughly speaking, the way everyone played along with Trump, oh, what a great peacemaker, a savior, a father figure, all the European leaders said this in unison, and Zelensky was among them. But now Zelensky is sending him a signal. He says that he's tired of putting up with it, and now he's going to start telling his American electorate, your American electorate, that in fact nothing has really been resolved here, and that you're still messing around with Putin, and it's still unclear for what reasons you're doing this. And in fact, this is the little torpedo that Trump will get, or maybe even a big one, because we'll see what the electoral consequences are after this meeting. And we'll watch what Trump does with this next, because he doesn't have any other options. Thank God there are American voters. Thank God America is set up in such a way that presidents are still quite dependent on the people. And that's why Zelensky will play this card and will put pressure on Trump in this way. And as for any secret negotiations about giving something to Trump or putting some other kind of pressure on him, no, everything is pretty open right now. Well,
I also want to ask you about the way Trump and Zelensky communicate, because it's obvious that the Ukrainian team has drawn conclusions after February 28th, and this has been demonstrated more than once. Yes, and here many people are saying that essentially if Zelensky can find the right approach to Trump, it might seem almost impossible, but in reality, the American president can change his mind, and this is something that needs to be pursued. So what do you think, not about the content, but about the style of communicating with Trump? Is it possible to influence the opinion of the American president through this, or does he have his own specific line that he will stick to?
you see, I am deeply and personally convinced that all of these external displays of pomp and circumstance ultimately mean absolutely nothing to a man like Trump. He is, for all intents and purposes, completely and utterly indifferent to them. In my opinion, the only thing that truly affects him, the only thing that genuinely gets his attention, are the portraits of American presidents printed on those little green rectangular bills. That is the bottom line. That is what really, truly concerns him. This is because Trump has repeatedly and consistently shown that he can say whatever he wants. People can, metaphorically spit in his face, and he will still just keep pushing forward relentlessly if it is to his personal advantage. Basically, at his core, Trump is always looking for some form of personal gain, and President Zelensky of Ukraine actually has a pretty substantial package of what you might call Trump's kind of benefits, not the direct economic ones like the kind that Putin has, for example. To be clear, Putin has vast resources like oil and gas, which he can, in theory, secretly give to benefit Trump, so there are some very tangible good things for Trump to gain in those particular circumstances. Unfortunately for Zelensky, he doesn't have that kind of leverage in his hands. However, he does have a different kind of leverage, which together with all of Ukraine and its civil society, thankfully a society that has come together, Ukraine has created for itself. This resource is called the reputation in the world that Ukrainians have earned. Today, when Ukraine says something or puts pressure somewhere, the world listens. That's why Zelensky will naturally play this card if we use Trump's terminology about cards, and it will be quite effective. Because if today Ukraine says, "Dear friends, your American king, Mr. Fellow, turned out to be naked, and once again he made promises and did nothing," it will be a serious blow to Trump. Naturally, Trump will screech and take offense at this. So it can't be done openly. It has to be done in a very veiled way. I didn't just ask you, Sasha, what your bet is, how many times Zelensky will say it during this conversation for no reason. Thank you. My bet, well, okay, it will be 7. Last time it was 11, but this time it won't be as many as 11. So accordingly, every time it'll be Thank you, Mr. President, but could you please finally start fulfilling all those promises you made to us last time in this Oval Office, when we all came here together with the crowd of European leaders?
I just want to briefly get your reaction to the statement by Polish President Karli Nawrocki, who, after the attack by Russian drones, well, chronologically it happened after this attack, though perhaps it wasn't the cause, said that Poland should join the nuclear sharing program and develop its own civilian and military nuclear potential. In other words, to put it simply, he said that Poland should develop its own nuclear weapons. What do you think? Will they let the Poles do this, and will it help them?
Listen, I'm Russian, right? Even though I'm on a Ukrainian channel, I can say that, in my opinion, the president of Poland is just a clown. Well, I have the right to say that. No one will scold me.
Listen, well, let's give it a try.
Let's try it. I think that Comrade Nawrocki is just a clown, and I want to ask him a question. Comrade Nawrocki, if you're watching us right now, don't you think you're really acting like an idiot? You were just telling us how dissatisfied you are with Ukraine, how bad it is, how badly it behaves. You kept hinting that we should be friends with the other side too, so go ahead and be friends. So they sent a couple dozen objects at you, including drones circling over your residence, those Putin drones. Well, you seem to like all that. So what are you unhappy about now? Yes, so in general, this is a cold shower for those European politicians who were saying, you know, that Ukraine also, you see, is somehow at fault. Let's start looking in all directions. Well, let them look. And accordingly, after all this happened, I think it will be interesting to watch Nawrocki now, by the way, to see how his electoral affairs are going. I think his ratings will drop significantly too, because his rhetoric has absolutely not justified itself. The only rhetoric that can justify any European leader today is rhetoric of absolute and full support for Ukraine, because now everyone understands that, yes, Putin is testing European security, trying Europe out for size. And what if he likes it? What if he finds it tasty?
Well, yes, that really is an interesting rhetorical question. Thank you very much. Rostislav Morzogulov, political technologist, was live on Ukraine today. All the best. Glad to see you.
Likewise, glad to see you too.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.